Prosperity and opportunity abound in Waukesha County, and yet there are still well over 20,000 people, men, women, and children, living in poverty among us. Those who are homeless, and those who are one missed paycheck, one job loss, one injury, one serious illness, one needed car repair, away from hunger or homelessness. What happens when you have no emergency fund? What happens when no one sees you? What happens if you're living check to check and you lose your job? Or the work you have doesn't pay enough to feed, clothe, and shelter your family? Or if an illness, medical condition, injury, disability, or mental health issue renders you unable to work in a family supporting job? Where can you find a safe place where you and your children can get a hot meal, some decent clothes for school and work, personal care items, household items and furnishings, help with transportation, financial assistance, all for free for as long as it takes to get back on your feet? At Hope Center in Waukesha, that's where. When people think of Hope Center, they typically think of providing food, clothing, and daytime shelter to the chronically homeless, which is true. We do that because Jesus calls us to help the poor, the hungry, and the homeless. But in addition to the homeless, there are many more people who make difficult choices between paying the rent or buying food. People who need a helping hand just to survive and stay one step ahead of hunger or homelessness. People who need a little help and a little hope. And that's where places like Hope Center and caring people like you come together. For the past 50 years, Hope Center and its predecessors, the pastors and people of cooperating congregations of Waukesha, with the help of thousands of volunteers and a small dedicated staff, has been providing basic needs, food, shelter, and clothing, to anyone who needs a helping hand. In 2019, before COVID, over 250,000 articles of clothing were donated, and 90,000 of those were given away through Hope Center's clothing shop. 35,000 articles of clothing went for children, and over 12,000 hot meals were served, over 1,000 for children. Almost 2,000 volunteers donated over 30,000 hours to help make this happen. But then in March 2020, COVID-19 shut down much of the world. Hope Center couldn't have volunteers or guests inside the building, but we never closed. Overnight, our dedicated staff switched over to carry-out meals only, serving over 34,000 meals out of the back door between March 2020 and August 2021. Post-pandemic, Hope Center resumed normal operations, but the small staff was stretched thin because less than half of those 2,000 volunteers returned for the same amount of work. Volunteers sort donations, stock shelves, and help out in the clothing shop. They staff the reception desk, cook, serve, and clean up after breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They pick up and deliver furniture, bedding, appliances, and household items. Hope Center's volunteers are critical with this important, necessary work. For the past 16 years, Hope Center has been operating in a former funeral home where our staff and volunteers provide quality services for our guests, but is very crowded, needs extensive repairs, and with stairs to every floor, isn't easily accessible for our guests or volunteers. The day center, where many people seek daytime shelter from heat, cold, snow, and rain, and where all our meals are served, is in the basement, sharing space with the kitchen, walk-in cooler, walk-in freezer, and food storage. In these tight quarters, Hope Center's dedicated staff and volunteers provide a safe, warm, welcoming place for our guests and prepare, serve, and clean up after 3 hot meals every day. On the first floor, in addition to our intake center, reception area, and offices, is the clothing shop, where at no charge our guests shop for children's, women's, and men's clothing, outerwear, and footwear. This is a very busy ministry that gave away 55,000 articles of clothing in 2022, with 22,000 of those going for children. We also provide diapers, baby wipes, and baby layettes, all for free. Hope Center has long needed a building with more space and better accessibility for our guests and volunteers. We looked, but were unable to find a suitable building in our neighborhood. After considering our options, we decided our best plan was to tear down and rebuild on our current site, which would have shut us down for about 18 months. But before we could get going on that project, COVID-19 came and delayed everything. And then in 2022, the bank building 1 block north of us, just over the railroad tracks at 101 West Broadway, became available. We took a look at it and knew right away that it was Hope Center's new home. It's a way better option than tearing down and rebuilding on our current site. So we took a leap of faith, got a mortgage, and bought it. It's an ideal location, just across the railroad tracks, only 1 block away, and fully accessible. There are no steps to get from outdoors into the building. There are no steps on the first floor, and there's an elevator to get to the second floor and the lower level. This new building triples our space for the day room, for food service, and for the clothing shop. And the day room will have big windows on one wall. There will actually be daylight in the day room for the first time ever. And with more space, we have more room to add services like a guest laundry and guest showers. Health checkups, dental hygiene, haircuts, a social worker, and other much needed services for our guests. And the clothing shop will finally have adequate room for storing, sorting, and displaying all those donations. We're also planning to build a big 2,500 square foot garage on the new site for Project Move to receive, store, and distribute donated furniture, appliances, and household goods. And we'll use the old drive-through canopy to create a covered outdoor gathering space for our guests, where instead of hanging around on the hot asphalt parking lot, they'll have an inviting space with shade and protection from the elements, surrounded with green space. By stepping out in faith and buying the former bank building, Hope Center took an important first step toward doing an even better job of providing basic needs, expanding services, and providing healing and hope to vulnerable, underserved, and overlooked people for many more years. You can be the hope for people in need by volunteering, donating, and serving at Hope Center.